So, welcome to our Debt Financing Opportunity webinar, where we'll share more information on the next issuance of the Women's Livelihood Bond Series. The WLB5 will also form part of our Orange Bond Initiative, aligning with the UN's SDG5, gender equality. The Orange Bond Initiative is a global coalition to create the world's first gender lens asset class by and for the Global South and the 99%. I see that we have a diverse group of attendees today from all over the world. We're excited to potentially collaborate with all of you in making our mission a reality. After this webinar, you will receive an email from us highlighting the next steps, depending on whether you are a prospective borrower or a sourcing partner. My name is George Stopczynski. I'm a senior associate in the Innovative Finance team at IIX, and I will be your MC today. I'll kickstart the session with some participation tips. All attendees will be kept on mute throughout the webinar, but we invite you to share your comments via the chat button on the bottom left as you listen in. There will be additional information posted from our team in the chat throughout the webinar. Please post your questions at any time during the session by clicking on the Q&A icon on the bottom right panel of your screen. Remember to include the name of any specific speaker whom the question is directed to. We will address questions in the Q&A segment at the end of the session. If you run into any technical issues, my colleagues Moa, Aman, and Glenda are on standby to help. Please drop them a message in the chat, addressing it to host and panelist. Now to the agenda for today. We will start with a brief introduction of IIX and an overview of the Orange Bond Initiative. Then we will move on to the focus sectors, geographies, our borrower criteria, the role of sourcing partners, product features, and the timeline of the offering. Following that, I will do a brief run through of our website to help you with the navigation. We'll have some time at the end to take questions, so please do stay around and share your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session, and they will be addressed during the Q&A portion of the event. Now, just before we dive in, I'll briefly introduce the esteemed speakers who will be taking you through the session today. We have Ms. Natasha Garsha, Senior Director in our Innovative Finance team and Gender Lens Investing Specialist. Ms. Garsha has dedicated many years to IIX's Gender Lens investing initiatives, our impact measurement work, and the structuring of the Women's Livelihood Bonds. She now also leads our Orange Bond Initiative and will be sharing more on this and our WLB series. We also have Mr. Dinesh Sharma, Director of Credit Portfolio Management. Mr. Sharma is responsible for managing credit risk for South and Southeast Asia. He has over 12 years experience managing credit risk in diversified markets across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. We will welcome Mr. Sharma later to share in detail the sector and geography focus, the borrower criteria, the timeline, and the features of WLB5 offering. Now, to kick off the event, I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Garsha to introduce IIX and give us an overview of the Orange Bond.
Thank you very much, George, for the introduction. I'm Natasha Garsha, and I'll walk you through some of the highlights of first who we are, but also how the Women's Livelihood Bond Series has been a groundbreaking initiative in the gender lens investment space, how we're pushing the envelope even further this year with the Orange Bond Initiative, and why SMEs and financial inclusion entities across the region have previously looked to be a part of the series and benefited from the proceeds in many ways. If we go to the next slide, IIX was one of the first, so is one of the pioneering impact investing firms in the world, really started during the 2008 financial crisis by our founder, Professor Doreen Shanaz, who was a serial social entrepreneur at that time, like many of you are now, and really with the goal to bridge the gap between the Wall Streets of the world and the back streets of the world, transforming our whole ecosystem with a new approach to build sustainable peace and to make sure that we are addressing the root causes of inequality and injustice in the world today. We have three prongs: a focus on climate, a focus on women as solutions, and a focus on building resilient economies, particularly in emerging markets. IIX itself is a woman-owned and woman-led firm, and so the gender lens part becomes very critical across all the work that we do. You'll see this on the next slide, and as it is manifested in our work on the Women's Livelihood Bond Series, which back in 2017 was the world's first gender lens investment instrument to be listed on a stock exchange, and in fact, one of the first impact investment instruments on a stock exchange and complying with the ICMA social bond standards, which we continue to do. So we made history with that issuance and have since continued to issue a bond every year in 2020 onwards. We are now on the fifth issuance of the series, and my colleagues will talk more about this, but it's been an incredible journey about changing the way people think about using the multi-trillion-dollar bond market to invest in women empowerment. We have to date mobilized over $78 million from a range of investors across the world, institutions, high net worth individuals, private banking clients, family offices, super funds, microfinance investment vehicles. There is a number of investors who have come and bought our bonds, which are listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange. So this is a fantastic opportunity for those of you listening into the call to be a part of a series that is listed and that attracts capital from across the world. We do this with the support of a range of banking partners from across the world, really, and a number of fantastic law firms as well. And for this work, the group has won a number of awards. Most recently, we won the Environmental Finance Award. You'll hear more about this across the presentation, but apart from having a very strong focus on women empowerment, we are building a very intentional focus on recognizing that women may be disproportionately impacted by COVID, by geopolitical instability, and by climate change, but we also see them as solutions to these issues. And in particular, as we did with our previous issuance, this year we will have a very strong focus on climate change. So even if you are a clean energy or a sustainable agriculture enterprise looking to build out your gender lens, we still encourage you to apply, and we will work with you to create a gender action plan if we like the way the business has potential for gender impact across your products, services, or supply chain. Many other awards have also recognized IX's work for being truly transformative with the way the world invests in women empowerment and gender equality. The next slide will focus on how we are using this to really push out our next issuance, the fifth issuance in the series, the Women's Livelihood Bond 5, later in 2022, which will push the envelope in a new way. You all must have heard of the green bond principles, and some of you must have heard of the social bond principles. We are launching a new asset class called orange bonds. And this is an asset class, again, like the other two principle sets, focused very much on mobilizing debt financing for sustainability, but with a very intentional and primary focus on women empowerment and gender equality. And it's called orange because the United Nations has 17 sustainable development goals. The fifth goal is focused on gender equality, and it is an orange hue in color. You can see it on the top right-hand side of our screen. The bond, the Women's Livelihood Bond 5, will be the first orange bond. That is IIX's commitment to the series. As you can see, there's a number of other founding signatories on the steering committee along with us, including Naveen, a global asset manager, the Australian and the US government donor arms. We have banks, law firms, UN bodies, and civil society organizations as well. We are proposing to issue a $50 million issuance. This is what we're inviting for you to apply for today. It will be multi-country and multi-sector, as we've done previously, multi-continent, and my colleagues will go through this, but we are looking at South and Southeast Asia, but also at East Africa. We are also looking multi-sector. So like I said, besides the very clear gender lens, which has to be there, we're also looking at climate. If we go to the next slide, I will focus a little bit more on what this means in terms of diversification. So we are inviting companies across all these jurisdictions to come in and apply. We will share with you right after this a form which you can use to fill out your information. And my colleague Dinesh will speak later about what are the basic criteria which qualify you for a loan. We look across countries. In previous years, IX has invested across Asia Pacific. And as a firm, IIX has done significant amount of work in Africa. So these are all regions we're familiar with and are looking to invest into WLB5. Sector-wise, very strong focus on financial inclusion, sustainable agriculture, and clean energy, as we have done in the past. We're also open to receiving applications for skills development firms, equitable healthcare, fintech, and sustainable apparel. Again, if your sector is not mentioned, we still encourage you to apply if you feel you have a strong gender or climate lens. Next slide. So what are the big reasons organizations such as those of you who are on the call with us today, and again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our brief presentation. We hope the conversation continues from here. What are the reasons some of your predecessors have been a part of WLB 1, 2, 3, 4 over the past several years? And the first is really the global recognition that you get from being a part of an award-winning transaction that has a very clear focus on the impact side. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide before handing it over to Dinesh. We also give you exposure, as I mentioned before, to a number of different investors. A number of our previous companies who have gone through the bonds have then been able to attract capital from new investors overseas and from across the world who have a focus on impact and sustainability. Listing on the SGX also provides a significant amount of credibility to you as an organization. Again, we've seen that this is one of the reasons you can build trust in the market by being a part of a listed security. IAX actually takes on a lot of work after we finish on the due diligence on the companies to make sure that we get you ready to be part of a listed transaction. We know many of you may not have done this before and may not be ready to do this on your own. And so this is where we actually add a significant amount of value. We have an entire team that focuses on the structuring of this issuance and getting it ready and into a prospectus, coordinating with law firms across the world to make sure we can list on a stock exchange and build credibility for your organizations. Speed of transaction, this is a lot of work. We know there are a lot of other large investors in the market. And I think one of the strengths is the bond that we're talking about will be issued in Q4. We issue in Q4 every year without fail. And so if we're talking to you now, it's not a matter of years, it's a matter of months. And we will walk you through the precise timeline, which typically takes across the coming 6 months from this conversation to actually deploying the funding. And then finally, impact evaluation. I'll actually ask to move to the next slide, which talks a little bit more in depth about why we have won all these awards, why all these investors come and buy the bonds. And it's really because of the impact side. And so we make sure that we're able to leverage on an extensive amount of work that IX has done for the past 13 years in the market, measuring impact for hundreds of organizations across the world. We have our own proprietary framework, which is very built. What I like about the framework is that it's not really just built for impact assessment in a vacuum. It really looks at the DNA of the business, of the financial viability of the business, and how the products, services, supply chains, etc., will actually not only prove that you can balance your risk and return, but also deepen your impact. So there's a very strong investment case we build for you actually through doing the impact assessment. We also push the envelope. We know there's a number of bonds out there who will stop at that, assessing the company who we're investing in. We take it one step further and we make sure that we are confirming and verifying the impact with the end beneficiaries, the end clients, the women in this case, who you are serving through your products and services, as your employees or as your customers. We have a platform called IX Values. We'll be very happy to talk more about that later in the Q&A if anyone's interested. But we use mobile technology to make sure that we can connect with the women directly and confirm the impact. And this gives the market a lot of faith in the transparency of the product. And finally, we've had previous very deep partnerships with a number of UN bodies. And so we're also able to do a systematic mapping of the SDGs. We do give this report to the entities as well who are shortlisted for the bond. So if you go through this process at the end of it, apart from the loan, you will get an impact report from us as well, mapping you to all these things and showing that women have actually verified that your products and services are transformative at the last mile. With that, let me hand it over to my colleague, Dinesh, who can walk you through the details of this. But thank you all very much for your interest in this, and I hope we see some transformative gender lens companies apply shortly after. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. That was very interesting. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Let's move to the next slide, please. So borrowers wanting to participate in the WLB series are required to meet certain eligibility criteria. So let's look at the eligibility criteria. First one is financial sustainability. So the entity has to report profit for 2 of the last 3 years. Second one is maturity. So we are looking at mature entities that have been in operation for at least the last 5 years. Capital requirement, we are looking for entities that need debt capital in the region of $3 to $10 million. Familiarity with foreign lenders, well, we are looking at entities which have already borrowed capital from international investors or have received equity investment. Then countries, Natasha briefly covered that. So in Asia Pacific, our target countries are Cambodia, Indonesia, India, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And for Africa, we are looking at Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Tanzania. Well, for the sectors, the borrower should be operating in a high impact sector. And the sectors we are targeting include agriculture, clean energy, financial inclusion, fintech, skills development, etc. Well, gender lens is another one of our important criteria. So the operations of the borrower need to benefit women from underserved communities. So we'll move to the next slide, please. So here we look at some of the financial aspects of the eligibility criteria, and this is segregated between financial institutions and non-financial institutions. Net profit we already covered. So total assets, we are looking at entities which have total assets in excess of $10 million. That's for FIs and non-FIs. Then for equity, we are looking at entities with total equity in excess of $5 million. Again, that's for FIs and non-FIs. Leverage on debt to equity for financial institutions, we'll be looking at entities with debt to equity of lower than 5 times. For non-FIs, we'll be looking at entities with debt to equity of lower than 3 times. On annual revenue, we'll be looking at entities with revenue in excess of $5 million. That's for the non-FIs. And for operational self-sufficiency, if it's an FI, we'll require the operational self-sufficiency ratio to be in excess of 100%. Let's move to the next slide, please. Now here we look at the key loan terms for WLB5. So in capital structure, we are looking at a loan amount in between $3 to $10 million notional. It will be senior debt with a single tranche disbursement. Utilization of loan proceeds. Now this is very important. Our loan proceeds are to be used for expansion purposes only. It's not to be used to refinance existing loans or fund any working capital requirements. So that's very clear from our side. Coming to the tenor, it's going to be a 4-year loan and it's a bullet repayment at the end of the 4 years. Coming to the interest payment, well, the interest is to be paid on a quarterly basis. And when we discuss the coupon of course would vary. This will depend upon the credit risk assessment conducted by IIX. And some of the additional parameters which will also be considered are country level interest rates, macroeconomic factors, etc. Currency, well, the loan can be denominated in US dollars or in local currency. Yeah, let's move to the next slide, please. The role of a sourcing partner. Well, I'm sure you're already interested in becoming a borrower or official sourcing partner for the upcoming WLB5 portfolio. So IIX from April onwards has already started screening sustainable business enterprises that meet the following criteria. So the criteria is given here, which I've already covered in the previous slide, so I won't go in detail. So let's move to the next slide, please. So now let's look at the timeline and costs involved for borrower participation. So our onboarding process of the borrower consists of 6 main stages. So what are those stages? The first one is screening. So screening will be there till the end of May 2022. It's already started from April onwards. So here the borrower will have to fill up a WLB5 eligibility test, and then our team will shortlist the entities and arrange an initial screening call with them. After the screening stage, we'll move to due diligence, which will happen in the period from May to July 2022. Here, the team at IIX will conduct a detailed credit due diligence and impact assessment of the particular borrower. Once the due diligence is done, we move to the next stage, which is loan approval. This will happen sometime in July 2022. And during the loan approval process, we'll of course negotiate the term sheet and other collateral requirements with the borrower. After the loan approval, we'll move to capital raise. This will happen in the period between July to September 2022. Here, IIX will raise formal capital from investors along with our banking partners. So once the capital raise is completed, we'll move to the most important part, disbursement. Disbursement will happen Q4 2022. Here, capital will be disbursed to the borrowers. After the disbursement is done, the last stage is monitoring. This will happen throughout the tenor of the loan, which is 4 years. Here, we'll require monthly updates from borrowers as well as quarterly updates. Well, coming to the fees, most of the fees will be covered by IIX throughout the 6 stages, with the exception of credit due diligence and impact verification, which has to be borne by the borrower during the due diligence stage. Yeah, we'll move to the next slide, please. Okay, so what are some of the next steps on WLB5? Well, if you're a borrower, please fill up the WLB5 borrower eligibility test by May 30th, 2022. We'll be sharing you the link after this webinar, so please go in and fill up the eligibility test. Once you're done with that, we'll schedule an introductory call with you. during May or first half of June 2022 to understand your capital requirements in detail and align with us. So that will be the introductory call. After that is done, we'll kickstart the borrower DD process. So once you're shortlisted and you pass the initial screening, we'll go ahead and kickstart the detailed due diligence process and impact verification process, which will happen in May, June 2022. So these are the next steps if you are a borrower. Now, if you are a sourcing partner, please get in touch with us as soon as possible on wlbcredit@iixglobal.com by May 30th, 2022. Once you get in touch with us, we'll set up an introductory call with you as soon as possible to explore collaboration and other partnership opportunities. And after that, we'll sign the partners MOU with you, and there you will spread the word on the Orange Bond mission. So yeah, I mean, that's it from my side. Thank you very much, and over to you, George.
Thank you, Dinesh, for the overview of WLB5 borrowing for borrowers and sourcing partners. Now I'll briefly take you through our website before we go through to the Q&A. So here I'm on our WLB website homepage, where you can find all of our public information regarding our WLB5 series, our WLB series. From our issuances here, you can access further information regarding any of the bonds in our series at the tab at the top. From there, you can navigate to each bond in the series. And across, as a prospective borrower, you can go into our borrowers tab on the navigation bar at the top there, or if you scroll down the page, there is also another link just there that will then take you to our borrowers page. And from there, there's a button that you can apply for our WLB5, and that will open a type form. Here you can fill out your particulars, you can run through our criteria and qualification, and we will be in touch once we've reviewed your answers. Now I'll move on to the Q&A. Perfect. And so we do have a couple questions already, but it's not too late to ask your questions. You can do so through clicking the Q&A icon on the bottom right of the menu bar, and you can type your question in, highlighting who it is for. If you want to submit anonymously, please tick the send anonymously box. We'll try to answer as many as we can. We have a few minutes to run through them now. So the first one I have, I think is, we'll put it to Natasha. So can you elaborate on the gender lens angle and how does it apply to business entities?
Yeah, certainly. So I think what we probably should think through is what is a gender lens to begin with. And so there's many different ways that bond issuers do this. The first and most common lens is a use of proceeds lens. How are we deploying the capital? And this lens is most relevant for all of you, so I'll spend some time on this. The first way you could do this is, of course, what's typically done is that the management team, the founding team has women represented, and we think this is all well and good. It's also a very Western-centric approach. What we are a little bit more interested in is how does gender look through the DNA of your business? How is it reflected in your products and services? For instance, if you are a clean energy provider, are you providing solar panels or access to clean cook stoves to women and girls, to women in particular, that would disproportionately benefit women? Do your products and services really intentionally target women and mostly are sold or support women? Similarly, products and services, you could think through financial inclusion. Are your clients mostly women? We also look at supply chains. This is very relevant for agriculture firms. If you have majority of your, say, female farmers who you're procuring from are women, if you are also practicing fair trade practices with them, that's a very strong angle to come in with. And then there's employees. We also see, say, ethical garment manufacturers who mostly engage in employing women. That would be a very good example of how there's a strong gender lens, as long as you also supplement it with other safety, anti-discrimination, and equal pay practices as well. That could be a very strong use of proceeds gender lens. Apart from that, and I'll touch on this just very briefly, as a bond issuer, we also use a gender lens. We are ourselves, as the issuer, women-owned. We have a number of women in decision-making positions, both in our senior leadership and our investment committee and in the team that structures the deal and does the due diligence. And there's also a big focus on diversity. There's a number of people of color at the firm. In fact, majority of the people at the firm are people of color from the regions we're investing in. And finally, in terms of reporting, there's a very strong gender lens when we do the impact due diligence on the companies pre-issuance. Like I said, we will diligence yourselves, but also the women whom you serve and benefit. And we will also then on an ongoing basis for any shortlisted entities, continue to have conversations and randomly selected sample sizes of women who we confirm the data with. So it's a very holistic approach to gender lens investing for certain companies. Like I said, if you are, say, a clean energy provider, if you have that strong climate lens and you have the potential to work more with women, still apply, and we can work with you on a gender action plan where we either have an increasing scale of targets for you to hit, or we ring fence our funds for particular products and services. So there's many creative ways we can work on this with you so that the impact and the proceeds of the WLB5 can be truly transformative.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Natasha. We do have a couple more questions in here. One, I think, for Dinesh. How many entities would participate in this bond, and is there any current update?
Right. Thank you for the question. So we are targeting around 12 to 15 entities to participate in this bond. And as a current update, well, already 50% of the entities have signed up. So the response so far has been very good. So please sign up as soon as possible so that we can include you in the bond.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We do have a couple regarding in the rate of interest. So Natasha, maybe you could provide an annual interest rate range for the bond. That's been
sure. So how I would encourage everyone to think about it is so we're certainly not here to distort the market. We're very careful about that. We will look firstly at the macroeconomic situation, the country you're in, what is actually the rate of interest that is fair based on the country and the risk profile of the country. We will then, of course, our credit team, which Dinesh leads, will do extensive credit due diligence. Our impact team will do an impact due diligence so that we can better determine the current rate of capital you are already borrowing at and your status of your operations that would implicate how our loan to you would look. This is a 4-year loan we are providing, and it's a bullet repayment at the end. So we would need to do a full credit analysis to give you more detail on what range could be provided. When we are, as Dinesh mentioned, confirming to move forward with the company, we will sign a retainer letter. We'll give you some indication of the range we think that would be likely or fair. And then we will proceed to do a more in-depth impact and credit due diligence. So we'll be very mindful and respectful of everybody's time, including our own teams, but also the teams of the companies who are applying.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We do have quite a few to get through, so we'll just try and run through them quickly. We have a couple of minutes. One more question, maybe for you, Dinesh. How do you determine how much capital an entity will get?
Well, so we have a very independent credit assessment process. It's a very extensive process of due diligence. So we go through that and we'll have discussions with the entity, and then we come to the amount which we can lend to the particular company. So it's a detailed process. I mean, it's like we go through the due diligence and then we decide that, but it's always in consultation with the company.
Okay, perfect. And maybe one more for you, just here, Dinesh. Does a borrower need to qualify for all eligibility criteria?
I mean, the first priority is that they should qualify for all the eligibility criteria. But in case they are missing out on a few, they can still contact us and we'll try to be flexible and we see what can be done from our side.
Perfect. And one more for Natasha. If I receive a loan from WLB5, can I also become a borrower in the next issuances?
Yes, there can be repeat borrowers. We have some restrictions around overall how much we will lend to a single entity. And we'll also take a very careful look at your balance sheet. We're not more than 25% of the assets, for instance. So we'll be cautious that we are giving you debt that's transformative and that doesn't, there's no over-indebtedness or overburden on that side as well. So we'll have that in-depth conversation, but we can certainly, if we see a company is growing, we don't lend for refinancing purposes. We also do pay very careful attention to the impact you're able to achieve. So if you're able to show growth and that you're able to show that the impact targets that we set are being achieved in a strong way. And when we verify the impact with the women, if they give us positive feedback of your products and services, that would put you in very good stead to be reconsidered in a following year, keeping in mind the other caps that we have across countries and sectors, but certainly.
Perfect. And just on that as well, we have some questions about sectors and different institutes. Mainly, so is it only for financial institutes, or would other institutions be eligible? Also within that, we have a couple that ask about gender lens private equity and debt funds and financial leasing companies. So maybe you could just shine a light on who is eligible for applying the loan.
It's not just for financial inclusion companies. So if you are financial inclusion, you are microfinance, SME lending, fintech, and you have a gender lens, then you are, of course, you are a very good fit, or an MBFC if you're in South Asia. However, we also do look at SMEs, sustainable SMEs. Like I mentioned, we've had clean energy companies who we've lent to in the past. And we have had also a number of agriculture firms that we've lent to in the past. So those can certainly be considered. We also mentioned a range of other sectors, including equitable healthcare, skills development, and ethical garment manufacturing are other examples of sectors which we believe have a good potential for having a gender lens and also possibly benefiting from debt capital. So those are other entities that can apply.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think we just have one final question now. I know we have run over, but it's from an anonymous attendee. Congratulations on the WLB series. It's so exciting to see a product like this in the market. Can you explain a little more on how to become transformational and how you make it happen?
Sorry, where is this question written? Is it in the chat?
Yeah, it's just in the Q&A. Yep. This is the final question we just received about.
Okay, I see. Oh, well, firstly, thank you very much. That's very kind for whoever said it. And Dinesh, do jump in as well. What does it mean to be transformational? This is an excellent question. So I think what we do is we work with the companies to make sure that we are pushing the envelope on what it means to impact women in a truly transformative way through the DNA of the business model itself. So case in point, if you are an agricultural firm and we know that women grow 2/3 of the food that the world eats, we know you are likely sourcing from a number of female farmers. What we may work with you on is to say, however, it's mostly the men you're dealing with in the supply chain, the farmers or the landowners who have bank accounts. How can we work with you to ensure that it is in fact the women who are paid a fair price to their own bank accounts for the work that they're doing? So you're formally integrating them into the supply chain and possibly also then providing them with other products and services that would improve their yield. Not only benefiting them, but of course also benefiting your business model as well. So that's an example of how we would be transformational in the impact with agriculture as an example. And again, we can do this for a number of different SMEs. If you have, and we believe gender equality should be a cross-cutting theme. This is again, not just for financial inclusion, even though that's the sector where it is most often done and practiced, building on the shoulders of the microfinance movement. This can really be done across a range of issues from climate to other forms of poverty alleviation, water and sanitation, food security, and many others. Women, we believe, are the solutions to a more sustainable and equal future for all of us.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Natasha. We do just have a couple more that have come out in the chat. One is asking for a potential extension in some time after the 31st of May. Perhaps you can answer that.
On a case-by-case basis, we can consider it. Our priority is to get it done by 30th May. But if there is for some reason they can't fill up the form or get in touch with us by 30th of May, please write to us individually and we'll try to consider it to the best we can.
Yeah, we strongly encourage, just given there's been a very strong response so far. So to improve your own chances of being considered for this year's funding, I agree with Dinesh. We would still encourage you to stick to the deadline best as you can.
Perfect, thank you. And we do have one more. I see a couple participants are raising their hand. Please do post your question in the Q&A and then we can answer it there. One more, Dinesh, is should collateral match the borrowed amount?
Well, again, that would depend upon the entity. So it's totally on a case-by-case basis. After we conduct the due diligence, we will assess the collateral requirements. Totally depend upon the borrower's financial situation and the country risk. So I would say it differs. It depends upon the borrower on a case-by-case basis for sure.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think that is all we have for the Q&A, and we've run over a bit of our time. We'd like to thank Ms. Natasha Garsha and Mr. Dinesh Sharma for their in-depth explanations on our WLB5 Orange Bond. And to everyone in our audience, thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you're inspired to join and support our initiative. Do follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter for more insights shared from this session and more. We will be sharing a recording of this session as well, but we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.